Hey there, welcome to episode 69 of the Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program. I'm your host, Dan Hugo, the managing director of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, a Nevada nonprofit, 501c3 public charity. Today we are recording on the morning of June 11, 2024. Today we are talking about all of the projects. We're coming up on 2 years old. In fact, 5 days from now will be the second anniversary of our formation. I was going to say filing, but the formation of our nonprofit corporation in Nevada. And then, of course, the determination of our 501c3 status was retroactive to our formation date. So 2 years coming up. We've been doing things for more than 2 years, though, and that was the Open Transit Project was our first hackathon, which we'll get to today. And let's get started, as always, with our links and our show note summary. Hopefully, wherever you have found this audio program episode, you are able to see the episode description, which includes the show notes. Reviewing our current project agenda and individual components as we continue to reach out beyond Nevada to participate in the larger Civic Volunteer landscape. That's pretty terse summary for today's episode. But that is essentially what we're up to. So just a quick rundown on the projects for anybody who is curious and who doesn't want to read through GitHub. Our company website, that is innovateforvegas.org, available as the first link in the links section, has some details, but we really need to integrate. That's part of our migration to modernity undertakings for infrastructure, which I have not included in today's rundown. Infrastructure is like our infrastructure as code and our main website. The main website is really intended for business use. We are a Nevada nonprofit corporation. We have a Nevada business ID. We are a determined 501c3 organization. So if the IRS wants to check anything, usually you do provide a URL for a website. That is the modern era when you're interacting, especially when you file for your determination. So innovateforvegas.org, not intended to be too flashy. You should be able to find out about our organization, who is governing it, and so on. We do, the website still has Sean Looker. Sean Looker was the original co-founder, co-captain of the original Code for Vegas. So he was in our initial founding board of directors, help us get up and running, the reboot, as I like to say. And then our name change from Code for Vegas Foundation to Innovate for Vegas Foundation. But again, Sean was the co-founder of Code for Vegas, which was about 12 years ago. So that was the origin story. Code for Vegas was rather instrumental in the deployment of what we still see today as the open data platform by the city of Las Vegas, although it includes data from outside of the city of Las Vegas. So Sean is still on our website as it is. Our new board member, assuming this person does join, will replace Sean Looker, succeed him in person, but replace the photo and the link. So yeah, our business website intended for the business side of the nonprofit. We do have another platform that I'll talk about today that will hopefully garner some interest from local civic volunteers to manage, maintain, publish, and try out some ideas there. We'll find out. In the meantime, those other two links are GitHub organization. We are Innovate for Vegas on GitHub, github.com/innovate4, spelled out F-O-R, Vegas, and Project ACT, the Autonomous Cohort Tessellation, which is a bottom-up decentralized effort to connect civic volunteers, individuals, and cohorts of multiple people in the wake of the sunsetting of the Code for America Brigade program, which, based on my discussions, only a few, but they all pretty much align, kind of an untimely end, kind of left a lot of civic volunteer-minded individuals hanging, so to speak, lacking some direction and some structure, or some infrastructure, really, So we'll see if Project ACT can help to enable individuals and groups as they did exist or as they could exist as they gather around the country, around the world, perhaps. So that is where we will begin after I get some water. So, Project ACT. We've begun some of the soft outreach to garner participation in this new bottom-up model of collaboration. What this means is, rather than forming another nonprofit or another entity of any kind, well, Project ACT is technically an entity of any kind. The idea is to, sort of like how podcasting works. You can publish your podcast anywhere you want. You can publish it on your homepage. You can host your audio files, your MP3s, or whatever format you choose, anywhere. And then the key to being found is to insert your RSS feed into one or more podcast indexers or podcatcher platforms, if you will. So Podcast Index is the Adam Curry project. It has grown substantially over the past few years. So they have a dramatically giant list of podcast feeds. You can publish to iTunes, you can publish to YouTube, and et cetera, et cetera. So you can be discovered by publishing your RSS feed. Now, RSS 2.0, 2.1, whatever version is now, moved to an XML first format when Dave Weiner was driving it a long time ago. Really simple syndication, allegedly, what it stands for. RSS 1.0 was based on RDF, the Resource Description Framework, and it RSS then stood for RDF Site Summary. Why is that important? Well, the notion that Project ACT is driving, is the use of RDF tools and schema to kind of do something similar. So the essential first step is to make discovery easier and automated with opt-in participation so that discovery and communication can be kept current and active. In other words, hey, is fill-in-the-blank organization still alive? Are they still working on projects? Are they still doing anything? Well, suppose active organization publishes an RSS like file called FOF, friend of a friend. Friend of a friend is a simple RDF schema. So if RSS has a schema, and if you've ever seen an RSS file, you know it has things like item, channel, description, enclosure, etc. So you can fill in some standard fields, if you will, in a form, and construct a file called fof.rdf. The fof.rdf file will look like XML. It will be an XML RDF/XML file. It encodes the RDF graph data, and in that FOF, friend of a friend, you might say something like, our organization is A, and our friend organization is Project ACT, and another friend of ours, we know, Innovate for Vegas Foundation. And then Innovate for Vegas Foundation could publish a FOF that says, we know we are this organization, and we know Project ACT, and we know Organization A, and so on. So we end up with a double linked list or network of organizations. Well, that's step one. Now we can discover who's around. And at some point, if you want to unpublish your podcast, or if you want to unpublish your presence in the network graph of autonomous cohorts, you would remove the file. You would just unpublish it. And eventually, the rules could be established at some point, what the time to live, as we can call it, how long a disappearance would be acceptable before the organization is deemed missing or no longer. Could be a week, could be a month, 30 days, could be a number of tests. Could be, the spider robot comes through and checks, just like an RSS robot, right? You're subscribing to a FOF file, Every once in a while, it comes through and checks, see if there's any updates. And if it doesn't find the file, it might say, okay, that's one fail. Didn't find it. 2, 3, 4, 5, must be dead. The iteration of robot visits could be weekly, could be monthly. So these are things to determine. They may even be variable depending on the size of the network and so on. So that essential first step is to get people to buy into this notion that using these simple tools, very similar to RSS feeds, that they can participate in a large network without specifically joining. Now, if you've ever published a podcast, you know that some platforms really want you to join, claim your feed, verify your identity, and so on. That's like a barrier to entry. So if the rules of engagement are merely publish this faux file, and then you can either, one would be visit the Project Act website, which will be launched at projectact.info initially. The, add me type thing, add me to the Project Act network, and you indicate where your faux file is, and that's it. The spider will come by. The spider being a creature that traverses a web, if you're not familiar with that term. So the spider will come by at some point, check the file, check for its validity, like, oh, yeah, this looks like a real valid friend of a friend RDF file. It will pull its data into the graph database that it hosts, and forevermore, that organization will be part of the graph, the network graph of the autonomous cohorts, the tessellation or mosaic, if you will. I will say the FOF schema does not really have what I would say is a visually oriented set of elements. It's very data centric, but not really visualization. In other words, you really would want to have like a picture, a logo. This is interesting or all the way to essential for a proper visualization of that mosaic. So we may extend the FOF schema with a couple of items, latitude and longitude. Where are you located? Or maybe a polygon. But these are not difficult. I'm going to guess that there's a geo RDF schema somewhere. And as far as profiles, I believe there must be an equivalent vCard schema, which does include profile image. So the long and the short of it is FOF is a starting point, just like RSS. You publish your FOF file in your homepage at your website, if you have one. And by the way, this applies to individuals as well. If you are one person in a desert of no culture of innovation, and while I often will say that Vegas lacks the culture of innovation, it's merely well hidden. It's probably around Area 51. Area 51 is not allowed to be photographed from the sky, if I remember correctly. Not completely anyway. So our culture of innovation is out there somewhere, or the individuals that make it up. So individuals, groups of people, former Code for America brigades, etc. You might have a homepage, you might have a GitHub or GitLab or BitKeeper or other repository somewhere. You have your organization there, innovateforvegas.org, for example. You can add a FOF there, and from that point on, once it's discovered, it would be read. You can add other organizations, collaborators, friends, colleagues, etc. And the FOF network will grow through these decentralized additions. And then if you remove yourself, then you merely remove the destination. So you're really connecting FOF files, the mechanism of connection. And then you will, at any given time, have a basic image or a basic picture, a basic notion, a fundamental graph that can be visualized of what the Civic Volunteer terrain looks like. So that's step one. Then we can delve down into projects. So there's another RDF schema called DOPE that I did a whole episode called This FOF is Dope. So the description of a project, DOAP, another long living schema that's been, I think it's about 20 years old. Websites and projects like Apache Foundation, the GNOME Foundation. I keep wanting to make a list. I keep forgetting. Although technically the list should make itself. Projects that are interrelated, a description of projects that an organization is working on. So hopefully this is already clicking. Any civic volunteer organization in the Project Act network graph. And I should point out, by the way, because of the nature of how this works, very open, anyone could create this graph. So anyone could, if the graph data is published, which it would be, of course, open data, open source graph data, probably published under Creative Commons. The graph data could be gathered and manipulated in some way, searched, indexed, applied in a variety of ways by anyone. So you could be a part of the network, you might not be. You're looking for someone working on a particular project. Once your projects are discoverable, your organization being affiliated with the project and vice versa, then you would be able to say, oh, Innovate for Vegas Foundation is working on a project called Open Transit. Interesting. There's another organization called Innovate for Manhattan. I don't know. They're working on a transit-related project. Maybe they should talk to each other. So the ability to discover projects and general project focus starts to become interesting when your cohort is small, when you are just starting out, when some of your civic volunteers have thrown in the towel, maybe disheartened or disillusioned by the sunsetting of the brigade program. Maybe they're just tired. Maybe they don't receive enough recognition, et cetera, et cetera. So there could be any number of reasons, hopefully repairable. So if there is a pool of civic volunteers working on similar things, the notion is that they should be able to discover each other. The next level, which I'm not really going into yet because it's still very much blue sky, pardon me, is the notion that for every project, and by the way, the DOPE project structure includes a reference to a bug database. So a particular project has a bug database or issues. Those issues should be traversable by either the same spider or a issue spider, maybe. The issue spider should be able to see what are the open issues. Are any of them marked as help wanted, which is a kind of a ad hoc standard. You could say, hey, we're looking for help here. This has grown out of Hacktoberfest and similar. So if there are help wanted issues, then they could be summarized and classified using the exciting world of modernity, which includes AI, large language model tools that do exactly that. So theoretically, and I'm saying theoretically just because this is still on the to-do list to even specify this or to describe what we're trying to accomplish with this and how. But theoretically, we would be able to run through and grab all of the open issues, and issues by their nature are not huge. One particular issue might be large, might be larger than a Mastodon post, but it's not going to be a book. So you can take one issue that's marked help wanted or similar and say, okay, you take that one issue. Here are the matching terms. Here's the basic idea. Here are some potential matches with civic volunteers who are looking for projects that fit their skill set. So rather than wandering around the internets, the interwebs, trying to find a project, if you're the kind of person who says, hey, it's Friday, I would like to contribute to someone's project today. How do you even begin that? So the notion is to elevate the visibility, make more discoverable not only the organizations, cohorts, not only the projects they're working on, but the actual issues that are open and available for contributors to say, production by street, I have skill set that matches that, or even more utility perhaps. Hey, we are working on a project that's very similar to that. It's possible that we could collaborate and help each other make progress in our respective projects. So these are all, I would say, low-hanging fruit, nothing too amazing here. So we just really need to have opt-in I'm willing to publish and maintain these files. And unlike an RSS file, a single RSS file usually is updated every time you publish a new episode of your podcast or your, by the way, YouTube supports RSS feeds for video. Usually that RSS file is updated by your publishing system to say, oh, there's a new blog post, there's a new audio, video, etc. So if you have an RSS feed, it's probably being maintained by WordPress or whatever platform you're using. You can do something similar here. So the maintenance of a particular FOF or dope, pretty much minimal, if any, unless your organization changes its name or the maintainer of the platform, the organization, if their contact information changes, if the name of a project is changed, if the maintainer of that project or if some of the links change. So occasionally they would have to be updated to stay synchronized with the project itself. Some of this could be automated just from reading your GitHub or GitLab configuration for a particular project. In general, upkeep of these projects would really be a matter of, is the file still there? So the ask is quite small, actually. And so if we can get a couple of organizations to jump in on this, that should enable. And by the way, Project Act doesn't have to be former brigades. Like I said, it could be individuals, it could be other cohorts. It could be organizations adjacent to the Civic Volunteer, sort of the ethos established by the early brigade program and its participants. It could be others working on particular nonprofit open source projects that are a good fit, that are kind of an intersection of the Venn diagram between what typical brigades would be working on, which tend to be more community focused, community elevation projects, and other groups which may be particularly focused. Say you're working on some educational tools, you'd like to connect with others doing something similar. There's really nothing preventing a cohort of people working in a particular vertical area to connect with others, and possibly with an organization like Innovate for Vegas, because we do have our education capstone, which garnered very little interest from our local educator community in Southern Nevada once there was an ask to do something. That's another episode for another time. So that's Project Act. I spent a lot of time on that one because it is the most active development at this moment. It is, as I did in our Order of Operations episode a couple of weeks ago, it is, from a public-facing standpoint, our most important project, even though internally our infrastructure, website, and MyMuni projects are more important than Project Act. Public-facing, Project Act, and MyMuni are more important. So it's the nature of project program management and public perception. Now on to our kind of existing project base. The Open Data Capture platform was initially interesting to several people when we had more people attending our events each month. Mostly those people would attend once, indicate interest in either Open Data Capture or Open Transit. Those were two of our very early projects. Those people kind of faded away once again, just like the educators. There's interest in participating through attendance, not through action. This goes back to the culture of innovation. Now, again, this episode is not about that, although I will mention it now and then. There's not zero. What I often say in general is that people who are doing things often don't have the time to show up to events that are, that they don't see as valuable because they are working on a startup or working on some sort of an entrepreneurial adventure or doing some research or so on. So it is not that there is no culture of innovation, but the culture of innovation is not visible, which makes it difficult to cultivate. So the Open Data Capture platform initially garnered attention from people who were interested in the idea, but not in actually pursuing it, which is a challenge. It's still an essential product. It's an essential project. It will be a part of other projects or possibly other products to be able to add more data to the existing open data sets that are present here in the greater Vegas area. One of the things that's lacking, this may be an opinion, I think it's more than an opinion, but is that open data sets, while there's an implication that they are somehow credible because they are endorsed by a particular agency or by the city itself, the whoever's hosting the open data, paying the bills. There's the notion of public data, which may be less, what's the word I could use? Not less credible, but less official. So if we have open and public data, there should be an ability for the public at large, the community, the members of communities, if I can speak, in the Greater Vegas area to contribute to the open data sets. Now, or public data. One of the examples I always use is habitat encroachment. You will frequently see this on the sites like Nextdoor, maybe an odd mention in the news now and then, that a coyote was sighted or two coyotes, a pet was taken by coyotes. This happens, unfortunately. The prevalence of beehives and what they call aggressive bees sometimes, and I think 'tis the season for that. So look for activity through the summer. The presence of grasshoppers, or which I think they're actually Mormon crickets, have returned to Vegas. That's the name of the insect, Mormon crickets. They look like a grasshopper. The presence of those, the increased occurrence or encountering of reptiles, scorpions. I know that's not a reptile. Reptiles like snakes and insects like scorpions, or maybe other potentially dangerous insects. These are all important to make note of, not anecdotally in a Nextdoor post or in a news article, but over time. So this could be an example of open data. Did you spot an unusual creature? A creature that you normally don't see around? Can you put a pin in this map and say time and date? That's it. Over time, you may see time, date, place, a pin on the map. Over time, you might see the radius of human-occupied Greater Vegas and an inner radius of the population area and an outer radius of habitat, wild creature habitat. They may actually intersect in some places, right? Well, that's why you're seeing animals on your street. That's why you're seeing a snake in your backyard or a scorpion in your house. When that starts to happen more frequently, you can say that the human habitat and the wild creature habitats are encroaching upon each other. One would argue that the humans are encroaching on the animals, but really, from the human point of view, they are coming into our neighborhoods. This can be aligned with water availability, food availability for the animals, so they come closer to humans because they don't like us either. Who does? They come closer in search of food and water, whether water directly or because their prey, their food sources depend on water that's difficult to get. So habitat encroachment is an easy one to say, hey, here's a way for you, person in the world, to contribute to the open data regarding habitat encroachment of wild creatures. That data could be made available to anyone, visible to anyone, rather than relying on a study by UNLV or some other educational institution, etc. You can crowdsource a reasonable amount of data, make it public, and you could derive information from that. Maybe that would be a component of a research project. But in general, one should be able to view that data on a map at any time and add to it. Thus, open data capture, as in get more. A lot of the open data sets, and I've linked to them previously, and we'll probably talk about this more if the open data capture platform can actually get to a usable state in the near term. The open data published today can be found basically on the ArcGIS platform. If you know what that is, you know what that is. If you don't, probably not going to help you too much. It's not completely user-friendly. It is not clear to me today, even though I have had conversations with the person in charge of the open data set management for the city of Las Vegas, where all of this began 12 years ago with Code for Vegas, helping out with Code for America. It is not clear how much the greater Vegas area is actually continuing to support like growth and development in general of open data, or whether it's a maintenance mode, or who can say. I will say this is probably a positive thing. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, not the North Las Vegas Police Department, the LVMPD, moved from using a website called Crime Mapping to publishing their data on ArcGIS. If you look for LVMPD, Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, LVMPD, Open Data, ArcGIS, ARCGIS, you will likely find the portal. It has all sorts of super useful information. It is updated daily with daily incident reporting. And then there are additional, more slowly updated as they update records, as investigations are conducted, as filing, so on. So there's there is a daily incident reports, calls for service. I don't know if there are incidents, but it's when you see someone posting in a place like nextdoor.com, you should be able to find a corresponding call for service, which indicates a potential incident. So if somebody says they just stole my car, you should be able to look and see, sometime in the last 24 hours, a call for service, a report of a Grand Theft Auto or similar, and you should be able to see where that is on the map, because they do place a marker on a map. You can download all that information as a KML or as a CSV, comma separated value, KML, keyhole markup language, favorite of Geo and GIS folks. The one thing to be aware of in general with open data like this, when it comes to crime or alleged crime, the publishing of location data with regard to crimes against minors, and especially sexual crimes, sexual assault, etc. These are often not given an actual location. They are sometimes given a location that is the area command, or so the police station that's closest, or somewhere else. This is so that the identity of the people involved is not easily deduced. But in terms of violent crime otherwise, and property theft and property damage and so on, these are often placed on a map, and that can be useful for other things. The City of Las Vegas maintains 2 ArcGIS data portals, one for open government, one for GeoCommons. These are really useful, but also should be expanded in scope, deepened in the amount of data, how often they're updated, and so on. And when people come up with new ways of adding data, for example, the habitat encroachment data, the GeoCommons data set has things like city boundaries, has business license distributions per location, right? So there's a little dot on a map for every business license that they have a record of. As a little test, I checked for my business and it wasn't in there. So how accurate remains to be seen. A way to feed that information back. Hey, this is missing from this open data data set. Hey, I would like to add something to this open data data set. So that's the nature of this whole entire project. And then to be able to add more new data sets. There is no habitat encroachment data set, for example. So hopefully that will, that project will all of these projects actually figure into our virtual Vegas capstone, which we never really talk about, but the capstone in this case, not in the academic sense, but in the sort of overarching project sense. All these projects that I'm talking about fit into the notion of a virtual Vegas, of a data-driven digital twin, not the Google Earth or similar, visualization, not so that you can build a first-person shooter or other, game. It's not for gamification necessarily, although if you want to do game theory, that's a different thing, or other gaming that is data-driven. But the idea is to create a virtual or digital twin of Vegas that is truly data-driven, so that we have some idea of what's happening from a data perspective, rather than from a headlines and perception and siloed community, lack of interaction perspective. So on to vLocal. You may think that this is a dead project, but no, absolutely not. The V could stand for Vegas Local, but it really stands for virtual local. A virtual local could be a real local. You could really live in Las Vegas. you could really live in the greater Vegas area. You could be a part-time local, still virtual. That is to say, as a computer person, virtual does not mean not real. A virtual meeting could still take place in person, but also with remote people, right? Virtual memory is real memory plus a memory manager that swaps memory to disk. So sometimes a virtual local is here in town. They may actually live here. Sometimes they're in town and they live here part-time. Sometimes they don't live here, but they come and visit. They're kind of a virtual local. When you're here in Vegas, who's to say you're not? You're probably not even in Vegas, but you think you are. So who's to say you're not also possibly like a local? This was an idea based on the e-resident program of Estonia. The ability to participate in the local, greater Vegas local economy seemed interesting. And this was coming out of the post-pandemic chaos when they were looking at economic diversity here in the greater Vegas area. One thing to ponder was, hey, why don't we enable people who don't live here full time as actual legal residents to participate in the economy, virtual, local discounts on things and special offers and so on, but they can participate in the local economy because they come here, because they're big fans of Vegas. They come here for a show, etc. So still has potential, but it's as a starting point. The notion is to provide a unique identity without necessarily requiring connection to a phone number, to a email address, to a photo, to a real name. This becomes interesting if, okay, first of all, vLocal could be used as a single sign-on platform. So you can, log in with Google, log in with Facebook. Don't ever do that. Just don't. You're basically saying, hey, Google, why don't you go ahead and participate in this whole entire platform I'm signing up for, so that they'll just tell you everything. And Facebook is even worse. So here we could have a sign in with vLocal, and we'd use something like OpenID, probably the most easily implemented for all involved. So you could sign in to some of the projects we're talking about today with your vLocal identity. Your vLocal identity doesn't need to have your real name associated with it, or a picture or a phone number or anything. So it's a privacy-aware identity that you could maintain, and then the idea would be to make it provably you. And in some, like for example, one identity might identify a real resident of the greater Vegas area, and this would be useful for voter surveying and so on. But you should be able to have an anonymous identity that proves that you are a real person, but not that you are a particular person. So you could have, I would like to divulge, and this could be a separate ID, or it could be a matter of which information is shared. Often what you will see is you will have an option to yes or no sharing information when you sign up. This platform will have access to your email address and your blood type and your hopes and dreams. You don't really get to say, well, I don't want that, I don't want this. Some platforms do enable that. So the idea is to enable someone, to be able to sign up for something and say, oh, I would like to not use my real name. I would like to not share my email address, and so on. This comes in super handy if you want to do voter surveying, for example. What are your issues that you're interested in? Which candidate would you like to vote for? But you don't want to associate your real name with that. So you can provably identify yourself as a resident of a particular city council ward or a particular congressional district, but you don't necessarily have to identify your address or your name or other contact information. There are ways to do this, zero knowledge proof of association between two identities, etc. So this is a real legitimate project for pursuit of things like data equity programs. This is interesting when you look at who has access to, internet, electricity, water, basic utility services, who has access to public transit services, who has access to health services, where's your nearest hospital? The list goes on and on. So if you can provide that information in such a way as you are not divulging your identity, then that enables you to participate in surveys about your own access to public health, right? You may have particular needs that are met or not met by local services. you shouldn't have to divulge your identity, which then could map back to a particular disease or other issue that you might have. You don't need to share that information with the world. So I will point out my own background. I did work at Netscape a long time ago in the security group. So we were doing security technologies, identity, encryption, privacy, etc. So it's been a thing for a while, and I'm always concerned. For example, at the time we were talking about launching this particular project, there was a discussion going on about a kind of a universal loyalty card for locals, and what that really does is connect all of your purchases to a person, and that shares way too much information with our local government. So here we would try to avoid that. There's still a gap to overcome about how the root of an individual's identity is protected. So these are things that would be ongoing considerations, ongoing audits, security, privacy, access issues, like who has access to which pieces of information, how are they connected, etc. So this is really more of a project than people may have believed initially. But we can also take advantage of some always ongoing developments, especially in open source, concerning privacy and encryption and identity protection and decentralized identity and so on. Not everything is a blockchain. There are two platforms that I'm personally investigating to implement single sign-on identity management and password management, so that you can enable people to do something other than write their passwords on a sticky note. So to encourage the use of even they seem old, but they still kind of work until quantum computing becomes prevalent. Public key cryptography, document signing, so the storage of public keys. So I guess I could add a 2.5. So there are single sign-on identity, password management, and public key cryptography key management. So the password management obviously would be secret. You don't want those getting out. But the ability to exchange public keys is something that is not difficult, but it is not done anymore. People just don't worry about it, and that's where phishing gets popular. So the vLocal project is very much alive. It just hasn't received much in the way of attention. Next up, the 4.Vegas collection of projects, I suppose. 4.Vegas will be a public-facing platform. It's really more of an administrative project because, well, let me start off by saying we killed off the Create For and Code For domains. We got those during the initial kerfuffle when Code for America was angry with us for using our old name, Code for Vegas. That's our name, they said. And then they proceeded to screw everyone over around the country. So we jumped clear of that long before. We never rejoined Code for America. And in fact, because we were hearing from people here in the greater Vegas area, if I'm not a coder, can I participate? Well, you have to participate. That's the key. But you don't have to be a code for it. So the initial thought was, we'll rename our organization formally to Innovate for Vegas Foundation. And then we can use Create For and Code For as sort of volunteer-driven, contributor-driven tools and platforms to publicize effort, to celebrate contributions and individual contributors, right? So Code For .Vegas would be coded by coders, and the creativity and the user interfaces and the web layouts and all that could be developed by the Create For people and vice versa. So people who leaned more towards creativity, visualization, graphics, audio, content, etc. Create For, and then the Code For would be people who like to write code. Perfect. Sounds great, except that no one was participating in either. So we dumped those two domains. The .Vegas domain is kind of expensive for your second year and beyond. So instead, we got for.vegas, FOR.Vegas. Don't click on it yet. There's nothing there. But we do have that domain. The same theory would apply. So people who are working on civic volunteerism projects in general should be able to showcase the project in some state, demos, etc. And that is not, strictly speaking, a part of the business website. So the business website can have sort of a dry, here's what we're doing, here's our purpose statement, here's our mission, here are the people involved. And hey, if you want to check out what we're working on, visit 4.Vegas. And 4.Vegas, the gateway to things like code.4.Vegas, create.4.Vegas, right? So the same principle could apply to those. Or maybe those are not popular. Maybe we should just have, we can have innovate.4.Vegas. But the idea is to feature the effort, the contribution, the creative works contributed by individuals and teams within our cohort. And the cohort could be local, could be remote, could be virtual, just like a virtual local. So anyone who's contributing to projects for the people either sometimes in, or visiting the greater Vegas area to experience. And another one we have bouncing around is called Volunteer for Vegas. This is based on a project that was started initially by some boot camp class members, I guess, for a local tech impact boot camp that was here in the greater Vegas area until the whole school shut down. So 3 of the students in that cohort of, I think, 5 or 6 students. So yeah, that's how that went. 3 of those students wanted to pursue volunteer.Vegas or volunteer something. So initially we were going to work with them on that and possibly be a fiscal sponsor so that they could get some early donations, tax deductible, and so on. All of those students disappeared, as the Vegas community members are wont to do. So no idea where they ended up. But the final word from us was, well, if you're not going to work on this, this is still completely viable. So there are volunteer efforts. I think there's an organization called NV Volunteers. They post to Instagram. Okay. But the coordination of volunteer projects and some other aspects that we discussed back then are still completely viable and completely useful. So nobody's working on them. So volunteer.4.Vegas could very easily be an Innovate for Vegas project. We could facilitate donations to support the project for the minimal requirements that would probably require funding. So yeah, volunteer.4.Vegas, another of the projects on the table. So the 4 platform, essentially a gateway or starting point for demonstrations and information utility websites. This would be a unified starting point to deploy our open source volunteer projects so that they would be visible to people, not deployed as commercial projects, but more of a work in progress, or hey, here's this thing. This is the joy of being web focused, by the way. Mobile first, web browser first is mobile browser first, I should say. So writing native apps is all well and good, but then if you write for iPhone and you don't have an iPhone, then you can't try the app. People are still doing that in this as late as 2024. So using modern technologies and web browser focus, you can deploy your project so that it runs in most places. So we could showcase these projects, works in progress, in the 4.Vegas universe, and also establish some utility demonstrations. So not only are you saying, hey, look, we're working on this, here are the people working on it, and at the same time, would you like to try it out? It's a great way to get some community feedback, by the way, and do something we call co-creation. The Challengers Project. The entire notion here is to coordinate external hackathons and challenges. There are many. They go on all the time. Usually a hackathon is one thing, and they're fine. Challenge, in my view, just for separating the use of these terms, the hackathon is more of a sort of an all-night weekender, an innovation sprint is another way of saying it. So the clock is ticking, and it's maybe a focused topic area or using a particular technology or something. Challenges tend to be longer lasting, even though the terms may be used interchangeably in general. Challenges are often longer lasting projects. They're focused in a particular area or areas. The teams sometimes have a certain requirement, like you must be a student, you must be of a certain age, you must have in the case of the Congressional App Challenge, for example, you must be in a district where your congressperson is sponsoring the challenge. So there's Congressional App Challenge, there's the NASA Space Apps Challenge, which is more of a hackathon. The Congressional App Challenge is an actual challenge. But from our perspective, both of those are challenges because they are outside and they have prizes. There's recognition and prizes and so on. Hackathons can also have prizes, but just to use the two words in a specific sense, a hackathon, usually a weekend innovation sprint that could have other outcomes, and there may be prizes. Challenges, often longer than a weekend, more than a stay up for 40 hours event, probably some recognition, maybe some tiers, as in you finish. And this was the case for NASA Space Apps Challenge from a judging perspective. You would be judged in your locality, whichever, what do they call them? Local event. So there was a Las Vegas NASA Space Apps Challenge. If you won that challenge, you would go up to the next level, which was, you were being judged against other winners. And then you'd go up to a final prize and presentation and so on. There are other types of challenges where you actually go through a leaderboard situation. So if you win a particular level, then you go on to the next regional hackathon or challenge. So all of these are fun and beneficial and valuable. However, discovering them is often a matter of hearing at the right time or being on the right mailing list, or you can follow the hackathon hashtag. I was going to say hashtag hackathon, which is hashtag hackathon, or follow the hackathon hashtag on Instagram, of all places. Instagram is an awful way to get news, but it is what it is. So the idea with the Challengers platform is to, not unlike Volunteer for Vegas. So Challengers, though, is its own vertical application. You're not necessarily volunteering for Vegas. You're challenging for yourself. So Challengers, the individuals, can work as teams, can work as an individual. You can take part in different challenges. You can find information about challenges. You can indicate that you are participating, that you did participate, that you won something. Why is this important? Because if we cultivate our culture of innovation, one of the things that we need to do as we cultivate it is to recognize the people who are growing within it, who are evolving as innovators, whether it's technology or otherwise. And I will point out at this point, not only is there a Congressional App Challenge, there's a Congressional Art Competition, which never gets any attention. But there are actual people who actually participate and win. So it's important to recognize that not everything is code and tech, which that's a separate effort, should be the kind of a foundational effort for maybe a foundation such as one called Innovate for Vegas Foundation. So not everything is code. Not everything is an app. So if we can recognize the challengers, then we can celebrate their not only their participation, but their achievements and perhaps their victories. We can all recognize that. Then when local news outlets, traditional TV, web, etc., when they would like to find out who won that particular hackathon, I didn't even know there was a hackathon, and that is so often the case. We hear about this in the context of a 2-minute lifestyle report, or a one page that will barely get to a home page or a front page or a cover page in a news website, so often pushed down by crime and punishment and intrigue and fun economy. So a unified place, not starting point, a unified place, not only to find, if you are yourself a challenger, to find opportunities to participate in challenges, to build teams, and to announce victory or progress, or etc. So I actually had looked into open badges, and I believe the Clark County School District was also going to look at open badges integration into publishing achievement. So that's still something on the table, although Clark County School District has its own issues to contend with. But showing off achievement and recognize that and celebrating that in a community that believes it will be the next Silicon Valley is sort of important. It's certainly important to the challengers themselves. If nobody knows you did something, then the impetus to do something more may not always be found. The Talks project has been tabled. It's coming up on a year now. We did one test, sort of a 4-person program production. Kind of a train wreck, but it was the first time. We had access to a theater space. It was any age friendly, which any of these should be. So the Talks platform, or the Talks notion itself, was conceived when Ignite Talks, I don't know, the IgniteTalks.co maybe, the Ignite Talks organization wanted to charge a fee to license the use of the name, but they also were fairly draconian about publishing video presentations. So you were not allowed to have a domain to publish video presentations under that banner, etc. So it seemed a little draconian. I think I may have said that. So the thought was, well, if we just get Talks.Vegas, we can celebrate and recognize the people in the greater Vegas area who are doing interesting things by having them talk about something other than a startup pitch, because those get real old real fast. And as someone who was driving the pitch workout room, there's a time and a place to talk about startup ideas. It doesn't have to be all times in all places. So the notion of Talks was to, what was it? Educate, entertain, and inform. I thought I had an E word. Entertain, educate, and enlighten. There you go. Enlighten, entertain, and educate. So you should be able to tell people what you're doing, what you've experienced in life, a learning lesson, etc. So that's sort of how Ignite Talks work anyway. Unfortunately, when we tabled it last summer, there's an organization here in the greater Vegas area, which I will not name here. There's a few problems with it, but they do have, I guess, an Ignite Vegas chapter here in Vegas. They're using the trademarks and all that. So the use of the term Ignite Vegas, supposedly, they're using the logos and all that. So I assume that they're doing that. They are creating an Ignite Vegas event at a bar. They've done it a few times now. So you must be 21 and older, of legal drinking age here in the Las Vegas area, which limits the participation to 21 and older. This is always a problem. The greater Vegas area is completely and totally enamored with adult entertainment, 21 plus, not even 18 plus. Whereas innovation does not have an age limit. You can be as young or old as you like. So if we continue to prevent people of younger than 21 age to participate in events like this, then, well, that's not how cultivation of a culture of innovation or an innovation culture works. And then again, not everything is a pitch. So if the organization driving this is about startup pitches, guess what the presentations are about? I have not been to one, nor do I really intend to visit. I'd rather pursue this project. So the Talks.Vegas platform has not gone away, but it will fit nicely into the My Muni and Welcome projects, which I'm getting to shortly. In addition, because we are not tied to one format, the Ignite format is great. And if you want to do a rapid presentation format like that, there is Pechakucha. I think I'm saying that correctly. So Ignite is fine. Pechakucha is a unencumbered version of it. There's a slight difference in the slide timings. So it's the same. I think it's 5 minutes, but Ignite is 20 seconds per slide. Pechakucha is 15 maybe, but I think it's 5 minutes. So it's something like I may be incorrect on those, but essentially Pechakucha is one format. By tying yourself to Ignite, you are tying yourself to one format. So we were looking at, could we do lightning talks, which tend to be a 20-minute presentation? Those tend to be more about projects, ongoing research, ongoing learning lessons, experiences, and so on. So we can do, that's similar to a TED Talk, for example. So we wouldn't have to be worrying about encumbered trademarks. We could actually have these as an ongoing, locally branded celebration of the people who make up the greater Vegas area. So rather than focusing explicitly on the same people over and over, We could actually branch out and have people talk about the things that they're working on in the real world. It doesn't have to be a startup. It could be a community garden. It could be a home-built speaker project. It could be tutoring students. It could be the state of affairs with traffic. It could be anything. Always talking about your startup pitch is one way to do it. Now, I will say, having lived in Silicon Valley during the dot-com era, you could literally go out into the world, interact with other human beings, and talk about things other than the startup you're working on. It's a true story. Our culture of innovation doesn't require 24/7 focus on startup pitches. That's the take home. Okay, we're getting to the end here. The Open Transit project I referred to earlier, let's just say this is a project that really needs to get some attention. It got attention initially because it is a completely viable project. It is an actual coding project with an actual real world manifestation. That is, real buses are moving around the city of Las Vegas with real bus stops and real schedules and real problems with all of those things and more. So we had a meeting with RTC, the SNB RTC Regional Transit Commission in Southern Nevada. We had a meeting for about 3 hours talking about architecture and ideas and so on. The RTC does not guarantee that the data that they publish, the GTFS data that they publish on their developer portal, by the way, they only refer to one. They publish 2 of the 3 GTFS standard data sets for real-time data. They do trip updates. They do transit locations. I think that's what it is. I literally just confirmed it the other day. So you can get trip updates, which is times, arrival times, and so on. You can get transit locations, which is the latitude and longitude and velocity of a particular vehicle. And then the third one is status updates, which they have not supported as yet, as far as I'm aware. Status updates are things like the bus has broken down, or that there's a detour, that the bus can't move forward. It has to, so these are still important. I don't know why they don't support them. So the existing set of data, which is captured by, manipulated, assembled, and delivered by Swiftly. Swiftly is a company in California. The co-founder and current president is a fellow Harvey Mudd graduate, Jonathan Simkin. I've attended their webinars. It's an important topic if you get around anywhere and you choose not to have a car. So we met with them. We talked about some of the plans. They were interested to a degree. They were interested in seeing a demo. No whiteboards. Got to have something running. The contact there disappeared, and who knows if they're even interested anymore. The web infrastructure of RTC, as far as transit rider information, is difficult. They do publish open data, but I just checked it literally today. I check it now and then. Kind of a collection of not really useful information. What I would love to see is a correlation between driver, operator, vehicle, route, day, traffic. You could literally pull out patterns of aggressive operators, passive, if there's traffic, someone who makes their way through traffic and tries to hit the stop time, someone who tends to run late if there's traffic. Obviously you can't violate laws of physics, but there are different driving styles, and then you could connect all of this with rider feedback. Now, rider feedback is often available through the awful, horrible travesty of a mobile application called Transit App. And I will say some of those review terms I've just used come from the fact that when I speak to passengers who need to use the bus, they're vision impaired and otherwise, the Transit App does not help them. You cannot read the Transit App if you are vision impaired. I've been told that by vision impaired people. It's not useful if you're one of the people who must make use of public transit. So that's an oversight. Language translation difficulties. If you are visiting Vegas from a country that doesn't speak, or if you don't speak English or Spanish, you might be on your own. And in a city with 40 million visitors, there's a real opportunity to engage people from other cultures, places that have more public transit, places that have less public transit. So we can make the system here operate with more people from more places in more useful ways so that people can get around and experience the greater Vegas region as visitors or as locals. Maybe getting to work should be not such a chore. So if we connect a vLocal ID, so we don't have to know your home address or your blood type or anything like this, we could literally connect you as a sort of anonymized rider to here's where I begin my journey every morning. Here's where I go 3 days a week, maybe school. Here's where I go 5 days a week, maybe work. Here's where I go on the weekends, here, and so on. You could literally, in real time, determine things like, are bus stops really distributed where people need them or where somebody thought that they made sense? Are they connecting access to transit with people who need access to transit? Are they connecting accessibility with the population of people in each starting point or point of origin? The people that are in wheelchairs or have other accessibility concerns, are they able to access vehicles? Have they been distributed? Have the vehicles to accommodate them been distributed such that my favorite example is the typical bus used in the RTC system has spaces for 3 wheelchair, scooter, etc. So ramp, fold up a seat, 1, 2, 3, then you're full. If you don't know that ahead of time, or if you frequently encounter a bus that's full, then there's really no feedback loop to say, hey, transit authority, you are underserving the community of those with limited mobility. Now, and then you can look at the policy for the RTC, they will say that if there's not an option to get a ride within 60 minutes, then they will send a special vehicle. Now, we're in the middle of a heat wave at the moment, so if you happen to be, you've reached your bus stop after cruising for an hour because bus stop distribution is horrible and because sidewalks are blocked by construction, but you didn't know that until you were, halfway down the sidewalk and now I got to turn around and go back a half a mile to an accessible ramp so I can cross the street to the other side to get around this construction blockage. True stories. You get to the stop and now the bus is either late and didn't show up or it's full. I can't get on. Now I got to wait an hour or I can go home and come back later. It's really hot. That might be a problem. So there's practicality, there's human engagement, there's actual, humanity to consider. And I think if we make use of technology in our smart city, this is certainly an area where we could shine a little bit. And as a matter of visibility, the project represents like the most practical and tangible connection between civic volunteers and the greater communities, because getting around the city is famously difficult. And if you require the use of public transit here, if you actually speak to riders, they will tell you it's not a joy. And if you speak to visitors visiting the greater Vegas area, they will tell you it's even worse than that. True stories. The Smart Social Project, this is a social network. This is not social networking, nor is it social media. The Smart Social is smartly capturing data and connecting societal information, not connecting people through an algorithm, through a eye candy or attention soaking website, no For You page. So social networking is kind of a misnomer nowadays, and social media has become TikTok and Reels, and they're okay, but they break the internet. They don't really service information discovery and sharing. They're more about capturing your eyeballs and monetizing them. There are all sorts of health issues for minors and young people in general, developing brains and so on. So these are just not healthy. They're not useful. They consume boredom with really no return on that investment. All that said, you can think of the Smart Social Project as the connections between data, information, people, services, whether they're online or whether they're things like buses, right? So the Smart Social platform is data capture, is open data capture maybe, is the capturing part, is the publishing of data in useful ways that are not necessarily algorithmic for monetization. So if we were going to capture rider feedback or, hey, this bus stop has problems. Some of you who ride the bus will know what one of the major problems is. You can smell it. So sometimes there's a need to feed that information back. Well, in the modern era, you can call RTC or you can get the Transit Watch app and file an issue and maybe never hear from them again. Or we could have in our Smart Social platform a way of reporting issues, sort of like SeeClickFix, which is a third-party closed platform run outside of Nevada. So we can say, hey, if you want to file an issue, if you want to make a comment, provide some sort of feedback about this bus stop, it should be connected to Open Transit, but it should also be visible as open data so that you can see over time, hey, these 50 bus stops or whatever it is, I'm making that number up, these 50 bus stops always have this problem. So we always have the problem. We always complain about it. So we spend our time. They send out, and I've seen this in person. They send out a transit employee periodically to service the various bus stops, and it's a thankless job. It's usually done at very odd hours, late at night or very early morning, like before the sun comes up. They're emptying the trash. They're hosing down. They're doing the basic maintenance, but the problem persists or returns very quickly. What is that? Is there a better way? Is there a better way to make these cleaner, safer? So safety issues, cleanliness issues, hygiene of the stops. And by the way, this can extend to everything, whether it's a coyote sighting or a messy bus stop or going the other way. What if somebody does a cool thing? What if I've been on buses where the driver is like clearly having a fun day. They're literally almost singing. They're helping people out. They're giving directions without griping. They are, and that seems like kind of the minimum, but they're actually making, well, if you ride public transit, you will know when there's a particular operator of a bus who is above and beyond, shouting out stops for those who might require assistance so that they don't miss their stop, et cetera, et cetera. So these are people that are going a little bit above and beyond. You cannot, as far as I'm aware, you are not allowed to tip drivers, nor should you be required to tip drivers. Drivers should be paid the right amount of money. What you can do, which is not advertised anywhere, is call. You get their operator number, which used to be on their shirt sleeve. It's digits. I think it's like a 5-digit or 6-digit number. You say, this operator did a good thing, or you can complain if you want. But I've attempted to do that. I've attempted to say, hey, this driver, it was on the SX route. His name was, I cannot remember his name today. It was, say it was like Mo. That's not what it was. Anyway, so he was being really helpful, just really good guy, good, made for a nice trip. So I tried to say, hey, this driver, this route, this time, really good. Do you have, no, I didn't have the time. I said it was the SX route, driver's name, first name. And they said, what time and what stop? And I said, I don't remember. I just know, how many drivers named that on that route that day? Like, why do I have to get so I'm trying to say this guy was cool, and you're making it very difficult. And I'm probably like in the 1%, because 99% of the people are not even going to go through that effort. So to make it super easy to not only complain, I love complaining too, don't worry, but to be able to point out things that are working. And those things might actually be people. Should be easy as well. Our city, our smart city, that is Greater Vegas. Greater Vegas is multiple cities and unincorporated areas in Clark County, but to the world, it's all just one big place. So Greater Vegas, if it is to be a smart city, well, it's got a long way to go, but to be a smarter smart city, we should have things like graph visualizations. How do different things, different people, different agencies, different assets in our faux ecosystem of innovation, how do all these things fit together? What services, who has access to what, et cetera. So the modern takes on, let's just say assets for a particular area. They should be visible as activity streams and connected through ActivityPub for updates. That's modernity, but we can have things like mailing lists and semantic web graphs, which we're also working on for Project ACT, and then enable open connection so that you can actually get data you want, maybe even build applications making use of your smart city's data, Maybe some of it's open data, but some of it is also massaged information and updates and so on, right? The open data platform as it is published on the ArcGIS portal is interesting, but it only updates infrequently. So the ability to interact with data that changes as quickly as bus arrival times in traffic, weather, flooding, water levels, traffic detour, all these things that can change on the daily are just simple examples. So the ability to pull this information in useful ways and build useful interfaces, publish these to AI chatbots, which is the ultimate conclusion of humanity anyway. Anyway, these are all possibilities if we start building the tools in that direction, and if we don't rely on our laurels and headlines merely claiming to be the next Silicon Valley. It doesn't work that way. Finally, I promise we're at the end. Finally, the MyMuni and Welcome projects. These are intended to be the most visible and thus most demonstrative of the Civic Volunteer possibilities for our greater communities. And now those communities need not be in Vegas. As I already mentioned, the Innovate for Vegas Foundation is no longer focusing on convincing local innovators to participate. Been there, done that. So we're really trying to be a point of focus, not necessarily a gravity well, but certainly a place where people could focus some attention on projects that face public users that may live here, my muni, my municipality, my community, or who are visiting. Welcome to fabulous Las Vegas. That's a famous sign that is not in Las Vegas. Most things are not in Las Vegas, city of, but they are in the greater Vegas area. So if we build things that are not Vegas specific, but which can be used by people, experienced by people, and which can benefit people who either live in Vegas, the greater Vegas area, or who are visiting, the same could be said perhaps of similar tools built for people living in or visiting other places. The nice thing about taking this approach is you don't build a single purpose application, which is something I've seen very frequently in the civic volunteer space, is you build a thing that works with your municipality, some service, so it serves a particular group of a particular population, and that may be the goal initially, but to make that reusable, what might be interesting is to make a community platform, a set of tools and services and expectations. Make the tools you build not mobile first. There's a notion that like everybody has a cell phone. It's not always the case. Also, once you go native, you now must support at least two different versions of things. You must support the iPhone and the Android. Maybe you must support another one if there's another player out there. So mobile web first, can still work on a library computer. If you do it well, it might even work on a Netscape version 1. So if we build and if we develop our projects and our deployments with the presumption that these could be used in other places, then the MyMuni and Welcome projects are those examples. The usual way of describing these projects would be to liken them to online newspaper or information portal. And you could say these are information portals. I usually say they're information sharing platforms. They should be interactive. So the open data capture platform would fit into this. Any sort of rider feedback for the Open Transit project, showcasing local content creators and how they connect to local fun economy elements. Does Vegas have the lock on a fun economy? I hope not, even though UNLV's Office of Economic Development is pursuing the trademark of fun economy. I've talked about that elsewhere. So rather than saying it's like the Uber for smart city, that always sets up the mindset of like, oh, so I understand what Uber is, therefore I understand what you're trying to accomplish. I don't believe that's the case here unless you are familiar with developing a project that is destined to be used by people from not only one place where it is initially developed, but ideally for other places. So it's similar to localizing and internationalizing and localizing a platform. You build it so that it works with any spoken language or written, and then you localize it to a particular locality with a particular language. So if you internationalize a website, you build it so that it knows that not everyone reading it will be either speaking of English, an English speaker, I should say, or they may not even be able to see the words. So you might make it accessible. There are massive efforts, projects, individuals, standards, tools already focused on this. So if your mobile app development does not embrace and extend those components, people, tools, methods, standards, various projects, if you're not at least taking advantage of those in some way, you're leaving a lot on the table. And you're building a tool that is only useful to some people in some places. So if we can embrace and extend the notion that what you build could be usable by people in other places, speaking other languages, maybe not with the same completely enabled senses that you have, you will go much further and farther in your goal, if it is one, to have people benefit from your civic volunteer efforts. I know it sounds crazy. So part of the challenge here is that people need to discover these things. When is the meetup? Who is in charge of this service? Who do I call if there's a beehive near a school? True story. Finding these pieces of information, discovery, can be a challenge when the web has made everything decentralized, which is generally good, but which has made people who are now hooked on social media platforms like TikTok and Instagram, which is bad. It's made them completely unable to locate information for themselves. They may try to use Google, but Google has its own issues now. So how do I interact with my city if I don't know how to figure out who to talk to, where to go, what website to look at? I know I'll look on Instagram. Oh, the city of Las Vegas has an Instagram account. Not as helpful. So we have an over-reliance on social media platforms, and we are underserved by our local news media, which is in the same problem space as social media platforms. They are there for the clicks and the eyeballs. They got to have advertising revenue and subscription revenue in some cases in order to make money. And so your local media is often, is festooned a word? Haha, I just checked and it is. Festooned, I even used it correctly, adorned with, as if decorated by ribbons and so on, festooned with advertising from who knows where and who knows what. And sometimes they look like native ads, so you're not immediately certain that it's a local news story or a legitimate news story of any kind, or just a paid placement native ad. So when the news platform becomes just as problematic as the social media platform, or when they start depending on each other too much, that is, Instagram needs paid advertisement, and local media channels, Review Journal, Las Vegas Sun, Channel 8, Channel 3, whatever it is, whatever radio, TV, do they reach people? Or do they only reach people through social media? Are they interdependent on each other to the detriment of the person itself, the one who's looking at all this stuff, streaming by, doom scrolling and whatnot? You might see a City of Las Vegas post or a Review Journal post or a Channel 3 post on Instagram mixed in with all manner of other silliness, but you might not. You might see it days later. It depends on the algorithm serving you, making information discovery that much more of a challenge. So the Open Transit Project is a viable path to an actual vendor business. That is, if people work on the Open Transit Project, it's something we could roll out, we could spin off into a actual corporation. It could actually be an LLC or similar to provide continuing engineering, continuing development, support for deployments of an open transit platform in different places. This is totally possible. My Muni and Welcome projects will actually, though, be the basis of our first, what I used to call and what I still call, labs deployment, where we are deploying software that's still in development for commercial entities to use and to monetize. So we can be powered by the Innovate for Vegas Foundation or powered by the My Muni project with these contributors, and they can be from Innovate for Vegas Foundation or other places, part of the Project Act outreach of decentralized collaboration across civic volunteers. And if all of those things can come together, we can expose, we can share civic volunteer projects and project outcomes in progress with people visiting a place like Las Vegas, all from all around the world, Some say 40 million people come here every year, or from people who live here. And by extension, provide a working example to people in other places. Maybe they even contributed to the project in other places that could say, hey, we could use something similar to help share information with the people who live in our locality and the people who visit. And that could be anywhere in the United States or beyond, because we're going to account for internationalization, localization, and accessibility. Problems already solved on the internets. Solved in quotes. Could always be better. That is the rolling update of what all Innovate for Vegas Foundation is working on. I left off the infrastructure project because that's always ongoing and it's never really exciting. It is the Pulumi stuff. It is rolling out our new website, which now at this point I'm in discussions about whether we should continue to have Discord, whether our new board member does indeed want to commit. And I'm not saying this person does not want to commit, but it's always nice to announce after it's true, not before. Update governance and all that. And our bylaws will be published, so those should be visible. So there's a few things. And because our website gets no traffic, and because the order of operations episode of this very program went through this, our infrastructure project is an internal priority, but not something exciting to talk about for an audio program such as this. So Project Act will probably be the most public-facing thing in the next 2 or 3 weeks, if we can get that sort of rolling up the hill slowly. And then the MyMuni project is probably the most important general project from the outside looking in. If we can get that up and running, at least as a version 0.9, 0.8. People misuse the term beta. I did a previous episode as well about did I do it here? Bring back the beta. That may have been a FFS talk. The lack of an announcement to the world that what we are using, what we are deploying and letting you use is not done yet. It's very much a work in progress, but we want you to be able to tell us about the progress. So co-creation, beta software, early adopter, early access program, etc. So this will be an interesting time, and the MyMuni platform will hopefully come onto the scene eventually, so that other people can deploy it. So the first manifestation or deployment of the MyMuni and Welcome projects in this combined deployable form will be here in Vegas, but ideally it will be interesting enough for others to say, oh, we could deploy that here. So we'll see how it goes. And but all these other projects I've mentioned all sort of fit together, which is almost by design. That's what happens when a software architect is putting together a list of projects from the bottom up with the intent of interoperability. And that is where I will leave it. Be sure and visit our GitHub repo in the near term. It's getting some overhaul. We'll add our bylaws in there somewhere so they're visible. Our Agile for Volunteers, I think, got a minor update. You could probably use a once-over, tighten it up a little bit. There's an update on the Code for and Create for documentation. Some of the user stories will have to grow in number for these various overview projects. And then we can start building some actual code and implementation. And while GitHub and Git in general are often, I'm not a coder, therefore I don't need such things. GitHub provides some, free to us, certainly. We do have the team tier for free because we're a nonprofit, public charity. I think GitHub, you can be a nonprofit or a public good project of some sort. They don't really require that you are a 501c3. Other organizations like Google provide free services for 501c3 only. Anyway, GitHub does provide some serviceable, for the size of our projects, serviceable project management tools. So we can actually attach user stories to tasks and issues and track progress and so on. Haven't had to do that much because the Army of One doesn't write things down as frequently as Army of One could. But that's where things are today. And hopefully as Project Act ideally get some traction and some attention and some participation, we'll start to collaborate beyond the boundaries of the greater Vegas area and start to make things happen here and elsewhere. And then we'll see what happens. Thank you again for listening. As always, don't forget to visit our website, innovateforvegas.org. It points to our GitHub organization. It points to our Discord server, which may go away. It points to our Twitter, because nobody's using it. Our Twitter account has been changed over to, as part of the MyMuni eventual launch. So nobody was engaging us on Twitter nor on Instagram. So both of those have been converted and renamed and so on. So our website will get some updates any day now at this point. It kind of got tabled, too many priority zero issues. But the actual update of the website, our smart social deployment will include some other things in the activity pub space. So we'll see how that goes. All kinds of things going on. And you can be a part of it. Thanks for listening. Take care. We'll talk to you next week.